Mr. Hoover and the rest of them. So any Islam, let me if you can you type it into the chat so that way the reverb doesn't kill me? I got everybody muted.
Can you grab that top part for me?
Hold up, my bad.
You ain't family yet? Huh? Huh?
1 second.
All right. It's only 9:30-ish.
I don't know what's going on. So what happens is we created, or they, the proverbial they, created a system by which everybody would eventually be absorbed into it, no matter how much you fought back. You know what I'm saying? So it's not so much about whether or not they was Cherokees or whether or not they was Lakota or whether or not they was Moors or Muslims or whatever. What they wasn't is what they are today, in the sense of what they wasn't was perpetual slaves. We know that. What they wasn't was imported from somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? What they wasn't was foreign to the actual land that they were born on. We can definitely say that they wasn't any of that. What they wasn't was naked savages walking around here that just were hunter-gatherers. These were mound builders. These were city makers. These are people that dwelt and had like lights and running water and toilets and stuff. That's why, I mean, think about it. If Europe was so great, why are they always coming over here? Africa was so great. China was so great. Why are they always coming back over here? Because that's how it always was. One of the earliest books that you can get on the original or the pre-establishment of what we call the American Republic, you can get in a book called Periplus, written by our great ancestor Hanno Day, who was the great-great-grandfather of Hannibal. He was the father of Hamilcar, or the grandfather of Hamilcar, I believe. And so when those great Moors came back over here, or never left, or just established the redirection, and then created the trade routes that they still use today to move goods back and forth throughout the world. The book is called Periplus, Periplus, I believe. You know what I'm saying? Let me see. Yes, Periplus. It was the voyage around the world on the coast and coming over here in America. And from the founding of that book is when he established the annexation of this part of the world back to the empire, basically reuniting everything in what they call in the legal document today that we refer to as the Bornstone, which is in Massachusetts, what we call Massachusetts today. Yes. Yes, indeed. So, this is getting back to that. We can say that that's the original American Republic, or the founders of the Republic, because they were the ones who were dealing with that form of culture. Carthage was ill in the sense that it was, as it was written about, when you read stuff like what Homer and these other ones we talk about, but really look into the writings of like Manetho, Manetho and them type of people. But long story short, it was basically what it is, what Rome became, what Rome ascended to be. It was, you know what I mean? It was basically translated into what we call Roman democracy or Roman governance, which is really just taking people over by hostile. It's about annexation of property through hostile takeover. So really, that was just what we form. A Roman law was just another form of draconian law. Draconian meaning anything coming from the draconian system, like very harsh, penile. Okay, so I think one of the issues of us getting into this is that we these terms are used around and used in banking and law. And the thing is, with other societies, banking and law and society and things like that have more clearly defined boundaries, whereas in our old customary form of living, those boundaries defined by the traditions and the customary things that we just automatically knew. That's why we were automatically, as they say, born on the square, born civilized, born 360 degrees straight up on the square, because we didn't have to learn how to be human. You understand? We already were the proto aspect of that. And so once we allowed ourselves to be lumped in with everybody else is when the problems came. And then we were, in a sense, put in a different form of education as to who we are, in which now we went from the higher self being the focus or the primary focus of self, in which now the lower self then becomes that which the higher self has to shine through from or overcome to be. Whereas we, in our culture and the way we used to live, how we were dictated whether or not things outcome was different. So it was a different perspective. Whereas they say, like how we know today, you're guilty until proven innocent, but we know that that's not the case. It was more of a situation where innocence was on the burden of who was producing the accusation. So it wasn't so much that the person that was being accused was innocent. It was the thing that if you accuse this person, you have to be morally and abjectly ready to stand behind whatever that is. Because slander was very big and is very big in the so-called melanated communities. You just can't go talk a stuff about people and expect them not to step to you. However, in the old days, you know what I mean, in the business between us, it could be worked out. But anybody that wasn't of the nation, it was automatic death. You couldn't just impugn the honor of a woman in the company of a certain type of being, a certain type of man, and expect to walk away, as they say, unscathed. That is the basis of what Chevalier, or the customary aspect of Moorish law, started as, protecting the will of the female, not to dominate. You see what I'm saying? Those practices came later as the original content that the men were supposed to be brought up understanding was no longer given to them due to the dalliance or whatever of their fathers, in which now they're forced to be raised by their mothers, or worse, being raised by foreigners in war camps and stuff like that, and now taught that how they live is not as good as the people who is now trying to come in and put them in power. And then once they're put in power, they become vassal kings to whatever state and help them do that. That's the basis of every drug movie, every movie that we've ever seen since we've been alive, because they're all based on the same story. You know what I'm saying? So essentially, any territory that is ceded to any state is therefore a part of that state. That's basic, like as they say, contract law, property law. If it was ceded to them, then they try to make it perpetual where they don't ever have to give it back. However, if it was taken by force, you see, and the consent was never really given to the people of whom it was removed, then it becomes the basis for some sort of action by whatever state was overcome. State don't just mean geographic location. As a matter of fact, it probably means that the least. State is the derivative of the word status or status, right? Which again is a Latin word. You know what I'm saying? Which means again it's coming to us from our own people. Therefore, as a state, state of being, state of understanding. You know what I'm saying? As a body, right? As a group, as a state of consciousness, you have the right to a Republican form of government. That's the contract that allowed that's the express trust of the contract of what we call the United States. That's it. It has nothing to do with whether or not you like guns or not. It has nothing to do whether you like a statue of Satan out front your courthouse or not. That's not the point. The point is you are supposed to have the right to express yourself so long as it does not endanger the populace. Now, does forcing boys to go to the bathroom with girls endangering the populace? As an example. Is that a threat? Has a crime been committed prior to them saying, okay, well, boys can go to girls' bathrooms now? I just read a report today that girls are getting, there's a rise in bladder infections in little girls who go to school and stuff because they're scared to go to bathrooms now because of the new laws in which that. So they're actually holding their pee and they're having problems. So doesn't this little girl have the right to feel safe when she goes to the bathroom? This is just an example. We're talking about law because I don't think we always talking about law from the defensive position, right? To travel, stuff like that. Do we even understand how law applies to whatever methodology of whatever state you're in? When they say red state, blue state, they talk about Republican, Democrat, but they're also speaking of whatever exists within that red state. That could also mean people who are in that state that really are Republicans but are voting as communist Republicans. You know what I'm saying? And things of that order. Yeah, like they used to have to get permission to come to the schools that the Moors went to. White or black kids could not go. And this is on record up until to this day. But when you read the book, Delaware's Forgotten Folks, the story of the Nanticoke and the Delaware Moors, it'll throw you because they'll show you white people in the pictures. You see what I'm saying? This is how they able to do stuff. But remember, this is also thrown in, and then Moors will say, oh, see, that means that these was really white people acting like that. No, these are small Caucasian people who, after these tribes were broken up, after these Moors was bleached out and forced out, the ones that was left basically mating with whoever was left of different nations, and then eventually leaving that stock to them to be able to hold on to their land. But now they bleached out. Not to mention all of these lands were taken by force. And we proved that, right? With the surrender, we can just go as far as the surrender letter of General Canby in 1867 at the taking of the governorship of North Carolina under military duress that led to the rest of the occupational United States forces destroying any aspect of the republic, taking itself up. And it's no coincidence that after that is when all the so-called race riots started. In some instances, they're simultaneous. So is that a coincidence? We can prove that so-called black people, black Republicans, the original so-called people who were running the congressional seats and all of that of the several states were literally forced out and massacred. Matter of fact, tonight in The Watchmen, they taking a play out of the thing and they comparing what's happening because it's taking place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in that, they're going back in dream sequences or historical reference sequences at how they dropped kerosene bombs and all of that to get us up out of there. But you know they're going to glamorize it and turn it into something else, and then get Negro Masons to basically back their version of it. However, there was more going on to that because each state, each individual Moor was still a party to the original compact, so long as they held on to their nationality. So in that, what is nationalism? Because people want to now say that nationalism is now another form, or being a national, having a national identity, or defining one with that is basically saying that your character is that of a property of the national government. But remember, brothers and sisters, if we are the nationals, then the original national government was descended out of the general government, which was the primary government that was running everything up until 1791. That you are still a part of, or were a part of, so long as you followed and were part of the protected by the treaty that was signed the same year they signed the Constitution. Come on, man. The last thing to be signed was the Treaty of Peace of Friendship, and they said that that's what ended the war.